Here's another obvious fact, and historically verifiable obvious fact. Most major transformative revolutions of the 20th century took place in extremely poor and backward countries. You can start with the revolutions in Mexico, 1911, the Persian Revolution, or Majlis Revolution, 1911 in Iran. You can go to the Chinese Revolution of 1911. These three happened around the same time. Extremely poor, backward countries, backward socially in terms of social indicators, literacy rates, health, and so on. And the Tsarist Empire was one of the poorest parts of Europe. I mean, there were poor parts in Eastern Europe, but one of the poorest parts of Europe, vast agricultural terrain. The revolutions all took place in poor countries. After the Soviet Revolution, 1917, it was Mongolia, 1919. It wasn't Germany, it was Mongolia. It was the other end of the USSR, a forgotten revolution. Vietnam, 1945, extremely poor country. The Ho Chi Minh goes out to speak and say, we are trying to build a democracy here, guys. We got a tough road ahead of us. 4 years later, China, very poor country, had just come out of a war from, that started in the 1920s. Okay. But in fact, deepened in 1937 with the Marco Polo incident. From 37 to 40 is the longest Second World War on the planet. That was 49. Cuba, 1959, and so on. We can go on. Anyway, all backward, poor countries. Now, you got to judge these experiments based on where they're coming from and what they were able to do in the condition of backwardness, particularly given right after these revolutions happened, there was an attempt to suffocate them. The Soviet Union was invaded by the white armies. Somebody like Mr. Piketty making a loose statement like that, callous statement, doesn't grasp the gravity of what they're saying. He's sitting in his office in Paris, brushing away the fact that Paris might have been occupied by the Nazis, if not for the Soviet armies in the 1940s. If the Soviets hadn't come in and crushed the Nazi war machine in the Eastern Front, Mr. Piketty would have to be teaching, the collected works of Hitler in his office in France. So there's a kind of banal callousness in some of this. And I'm speaking bluntly to you because it's irritating. It's irritating to have a responsible intellectual so dismissive about complicated phenomena in world history. And I put the complexity first, Jyotisman, because people should understand that when Lenin gets into the Kremlin, he's dealing with a country which has collapsed, where people are starving and they were invaded. There were internal challenges and so on. And the advances that the Soviet Union made are better judged by a liberal like Jawaharlal Nehru than a liberal by Thomas Piketty. Nehru goes to the Soviet Union in 1927, 10-year anniversary of the revolution. And he comes back to India and he writes a book called Soviet Russia. It's not much read. And in fact, I keep thinking I want to republish the book. Because what Nehru says in that is he says, look, this reminds me of India. We go to rural Russia and it's just like rural India. The difference is, he says, in 10 years, they've got people reading. He says, you go into small villages and there's a library. People are coming and they're proud of their literacy campaign because that was the heart of the revolutionary process. Same in China, the literacy campaign. Within decades, these places eradicated literacy. When India won its independence, the literacy rate was 12%. Okay, 12%. I would like to ask Mr. Piketty, what was the literacy rate in Algeria in 1962 when the Algerians threw the French out? Now you'll tell me, well, the Algerian struggle for independence was also useless. Truly, what is the condition now in Burkina Faso, in Mali, all ex-French colonies? Let's talk about that. You see, and I'm not trying to be evasive. I'm being direct. I'm saying that to dismiss something like the Soviet Union or the Cuban Revolution or the Vietnamese Revolution without understanding that these are places where the social indicators were so deleterious to human life, and that the revolution made it its commitment to improve those conditions above all else.